All right, hi everybody. I'm here again with Dee. We're discussing Sea Viper today. Going to go through her kit, sort of a guide on how to play her. I'm going to ask some questions as befitting my status as an inexperienced player, and Dee's going to learn me right. It'll be great. Dee, it's all yours. I will sit back and ask questions as they occur to me.
Yeah, sounds good. Right, so howdy folks. I'm going to preface this with a disclaimer that's probably going to sound a little different because I don't have a script for it, but is essentially the same anytime I do one of these, which is that the way I'm going to describe approaching this character is going to make it sound like some things are just correct, some things are always the way you do things, some things are never the way you do things. These are the rules of my strategy. These are a part of how I play the character. They don't have to be yours. And of course, I'm not saying that the way that I approach the character is necessarily the correct way. I certainly don't think it's the only way. So if you don't like something that I say about how to play the character, then don't do that. If it's not exciting, if it's not cool, if it doesn't fit what you want to do, don't do it. Play the way you want to play. You'll probably be better at it than trying to play the way that you don't want to play. That's how it works. All right.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be relatively pronounced here because, as I was mentioning just before we started, the way that I run Viper is in a strategic sense, far more linear than how I run most characters, but in a tactical sense, far more dynamic than how I run many characters. Um, and I'll disambiguate that as we go, because the thing that I love about Viper is the same thing that I love about Kokonoe from BlazBlue, which is that you have incredibly dynamic offensive options in almost every situation. Um, they're limited for different reasons. Kokonoe is limited mostly by resources. Viper is limited mostly by positioning. But they both have what I describe as alchemy, which is where you look at your hands and you go, here are half a dozen really cool things that I could do, and then you pick one and you do it. So let me grab some Viper cards and start by making a bold claim. If Viper takes the prepare action, she's losing.
Right.
Viper should never ever prepare. This is because Viper can't take turns off. Viper is one of the most aggressive characters in the game. She's extremely rushdown oriented. Back in the day when we were still, by we I mean the collective we, when the community was early on learning how Season 3 Street Fighter characters worked and developing early strategic lines, I and at least one other person were trying to develop a Viper that was designed to be more of a defensive character, or one who played at least not full on offense, not full on defense, which we affectionately nicknamed Two Boost Viper. This was terrible, and I will come back to that in a minute. So first thing you need to know is how Sea Viper's ability actually works. So the text on it, people often have trouble reading properly. After you resolve a continuous boost, you may strike. This means when you play a continuous boost, you may strike.
Right. Okay.
Yep. After you resolve is just after any now effects. This adds to the confusion because she has a now effect which says take another action. And the way these interact is not intuitive, which is that if you take the other action, then you don't also strike. It's one or
Right.
the other.
Right.
So that interaction is a bit confusing. But what the ability essentially says is when you take the boost action, play a continuous boost, you don't have to end your turn. You can strike.
Right.
This means that you will usually play continuous boosts in order to then immediately strike. This means, notably, most of the time that you're striking, you're spending 2 cards,
Right.
and not just 1, because you have a boost and then you strike. You might think that's going to cause you to go low on hand size, which is accurate. So you're going to need to prepare, which is inaccurate. Sea Viper
Right.
has arguably the most the most draw in Season 3, depending on how exactly you measure it, and is very high draw in Exceed as a whole because of this boost
Yep.
and this effect. So
The kicker on her exceed, you mean?
when you exceed, draw 5.
Okay.
Means that if you have 1 card in hand and then you exceed, you now end your turn with 7 cards in hands. So
Right.
you draw 5 plus 1 for a turn. That's phenomenal. That means that you just paid 3 force, as it were, to change cards, but you drew 2 extra cards. So it's better than if you just pay gauges force to change cards, which many characters will have to do anyway sometimes. So the usual strategic shape of Sea Viper play is uh, for about 3 strikes or about 4 turns, depending on exactly how things shake out. She is burning out her hands, building 3 gauge. Then she reloads, and then she continues to strike every turn until you die.
Right.
Um, Preparing is giving the opponent an opportunity to reposition in a way that's favorable for them, to draw more cards that they have good defensive options, to play their own boost, which makes it hard for you to establish a superior boost situation on your turn. All these things are bad for you. They could also just strike on their turn. That's actually also bad for you. Sea Viper is not very good on defense. Her attack shapes, as you can kind of tell at a glance, but I'll also go over in detail, are not fast. If the opponent initiates, you are very likely to be going slower because
Right.
this is on curve at best, on curve at best, on curve at best, under curve at best,
Yep.
very under curve at best,
Yep. And even extending over to her ultras, that's still
on
true.
curve at best, very under curve at best.
Yes.
She does not have above curve
So
tools. She does not have reversals.
right.
Mhm.
So D, before we keep going with some of the strategic concepts, I wanted to go back to the thing you said about alchemy
Mhm.
for a second. Um, and in so to me that makes me think that there's considerations about Viper where you can uh, spend resources and kind of play some jazz with your hand and improvise an incredible attack, and now you've hit the attack, and because you've hit that attack and you've spent your resources, you've lost the game. Is that accurate? Is she a character who is um uh able to make really great long term, or I'm sorry, short term gains, but by doing so she runs the risk of running herself out?
Uh, if that happens, then that means you are playing like suboptimally. That I say
Okay.
that is normal because that is the hard part of playing Viper is maintaining offense without risking loss of tempo. So
Right.
looking at a hand and going, how do I play this in a way that does what I need it to do, but also not burn myself out on the next turn, regardless of what my opponent is doing on their turn. Like that's hard. That's very, very
Right.
difficult.
Especially because I'm going to look at this hand and see that I am, I have so many options and so many abilities to change the shape of my attacks in ways that let me get what I want out of them.
Mhm.
I'm going to be tempted,
Yeah.
right?
Like
Okay.
I'm just gonna
So
grab a hands and play a little Viper where I go, okay, at range 4, I'm doing nothing. That's not a surprise. Um,
right.
Viper is not very good at range 4. She does actually have a mix-up, but, uh, that's a turn. But if I look at this
Yep.
hand at range 1, then I have Fierce Focus, I have Exoskeletal Grasp, uh, and I have Fierce Grasp.
Yep.
Fierce Grasp is 5 power. Ryu has 2 different cards that have 5 guard, so if you throw a +2 power out, he's probably not going to play Tatsumaki Senpukyaku or Donkey Kick. I'm just pulling some this is just things I happen to know about Ryu, right, is
Sure.
this. And you go, "Well,
Yeah, sure.
if you have +2 power, I'm not defending with these because they get stunned." Right?
Sure. These are stable-ish cards most of the time, but as soon as you put any sort of power on top of the initiating attack, they're way less safe.
Yep. So if you throw +2
Right.
power in play, then the opponent probably doesn't defend with cards like this. They go,
Right.
"Okay, well, maybe they need to defend with their own focus or something." At which point, they have to decide, are they willing to defend with focus against what could be an 8 power sweep?
Right.
Or are they going to try to play a grasp to cover your assaults, at which point you can play your grasp to stuff them out? It makes your mix-up far more intense. And you can do this with every hand of Viper cards, is like, we got kind of a silly one, but that's every hand is silly depending on your perspective. We go, okay, I have plus power cross.
Yep.
I have, actually in this hand, I would say I have exoskeletal wild swing. Um, because these don't hit at range 1. And
Right.
that's actually, we're going to come to that with the weaknesses of Viper and how you deal with them and how you play against Viper. But yeah,
Okay.
this is the alchemy of Viper.
And
Is you look at a hand and you go, what are all my continuous boosts? Okay. how do each of these interact with all of the other cards in my hands to make a series of options, and then which of those is the most exciting, and what effects does it
Right.
have?
And in terms of and that speaks to what you were saying about sort of tactical flexibility, but maybe strategic linearity, where I noticed that on turn one of this kind of mock game, you played a boost that ran you into range that would let you play with the rest of your hand. Notably, did not strike at that time.
Yep.
And then it seems to me that what you're saying is that that's kind of an aberration in terms of Viper play. That I really should be striking pretty much as I possibly can.
It is not an aberration at
Um,
range 4 and greater.
okay.
This is part of what I mean when so strategic linearity. Let me actually talk through all the things that are strategically linear. If you're at range 4 or 5, you're allowed to strike. You're allowed to use one of these 2 cards at range 5. That's one. Here's the other one.
Okay.
At range 4, you are allowed to strike or boost with cross or take the move action. Here are the 2 cards you can strike with.
Yep.
And here's the card you can boost with. At ranges 1, 2, and 3, the world opens up.
Right.
So actually, let me reflect ranges here. This is range 5. These are your range 4 plays. All right.
Yep. And I'm noticing even among the range 5 plays and the range 4 plays, the strikes that you're planning to
I should
use
also
move you in.
Yeah, this is also valid at range 4.
Other than block, the strikes that you're planning to use at range 4 or 5 move you in.
Yes.
Okay, so option or plan 1 with Viper, get to the part of the board where her hand actually is valuable. Part 2, stay there and keep striking.
Right. And it's tempting
Okay.
to move like 1 step forward at range 3, and that can be an option. The problem with that is, I mean, Ryu is an extreme example, but the problem with that generally is that if you are taking a step forward, the opponent is taking a step backward.
Yep.
And eventually you'll end up next to the wall and they will move into range 1, where you are less threatening than you would be at range 2 or 3.
Okay. And those are kind of my ranges, is 2 or 3.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, those are her favorite ranges because that's where she threatens her scariest and most unavoidable payouts. She is also not bad at all at range 1. This is because normals are good at range 1, and she does have a big, dumb range 1 mid speed.
Yep.
Which is
And all of those,
yeah.
great continuous boosts that she can put on her cards, they work just as well on normals.
Yep, absolutely.
So she can when she's forced into range 1, it's not like her kit turns off. It just means that she needs to pay out with different options.
Exactly. Like you look at this boost,
Okay.
and you go, okay, if we've spent some footsies time moving in, and my opponent can't cross out because of that, which is often going to happen, I put this on sweep, and it loses to exactly dive. Because this stuns sweep, it stuns focus, they cannot play block, and it trades up against everything else. Like, cool, that's pretty good to have a card that loses to exactly one thing.
Well, one card which doesn't hit you, which doesn't actually hit back most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it tends not to trade except for things where it trades up very, very significantly.
Sure.
And you can do that a lot. So like a very common setup for your third gauge is to hang on to this card so that you can boost it, and then play either sweep or grasp or focus or whatever, something that's reasonably likely to hit. Because this boost is really scary for your opponent to play into. They will often play block because they look at this and they go, wow, if I play a focus, I get stunned unless it's grasp. And if I play anything other than focus, then it gets stunned if it's grasp. Like I have to call this mix up really hard.
And when you say that this is your play for your third gauge, you would then empty your hand with the Rekka effect, the spend up to 4 force, and then exceed to refill.
Right. And that's kind of the standard line is you go, well, if I still have cards in hands, but I already have 2 gauge, then I can say, hey, I'm willing to throw my hand away, and you know it. So you know that I'm about to do this, and you don't know how many ultras I have.
Right. And so you can just pump your next hit so big that they need to respect every element of your mix up.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're empty. Hopefully you hit, but
it also lets you throw things
and now you're
It also lets you throw things to actually secure value, where you go, even if you only throw 2 cards from your hand on this, but you drop down to exactly 1 card and you exceed next turn, that means that you didn't discard any for end of turn. And for most characters, actually for all characters, I say generally discarding for end of turn is not a bad thing. Don't worry about it. However,
Mhm.
if you are trying to win the game in as few turns as possible, then you would rather discard for power than discard for end of turn. So
I
this just
see.
lets you do that, where you go, well, if I'm going to be discarding later, I may as well discard now and deal more damage.
And get damage out of it. So, and is that broadly true of Rekka effects in general, or is that specifically because of
It's because of how much
Viper's
draw
ability
Viper
to reload
has.
her
Yeah,
hand?
it's because of Viper's
Okay,
reload. Most characters, you go, okay, if I pay out on this Rekka, I'm probably going to have to do something to reload. With
right.
Viper, it's I have a scripted reload that is going to happen, so I may as well pay
Right.
out before it happens.
Okay, so and when you said that again, going back to the third gauge play idea, that is a threat then because your opponent knows that you're about to reload and
Mhm.
that's in their mind that
They know
that
that this boost,
uh
it does not have as real a cost on you as it would on anyone else.
yeah, and they're like, "Oh my god, she's capable of anything."
Yep,
Uh she'll empty her whole hand if she has to here.
yep,
Okay, that makes sense.
yep. Uh, all right, so scripted lines, right? So we've got our range 5 plays, we've got our range 4 plays.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can also boost this at range 5.
Yep.
This is valid across both of them. Um, it is important that you sometimes are willing to throw a dive with fierce or with burning kick, or sorry, blazing kick, blazing the boost.
Yep.
The attack is burning kick. At
Yep.
range 4 because you need to retain mix up. If you never play dive, then they never play sweep, which means they never lose to
Yep.
block and seismic hammer.
Yep. Yep.
Also,
Okay.
if you never play seismic hammer, then they never play a thing that loses to that. Like you need to be careful which
Right.
things you play. The like
Right.
representing each side of this mix up is essential, and then holding block as a more reliable tool that you can use to beat most things they would want to play on either end of it is also like these are all good. Seismic is obviously unsafe. They can just play a dive. Most people aren't going to respond to dive as long as you are occasionally playing dive yourself, which is like I said, why you need to
Okay.
make sure you play your own dive. Uh,
Right. And so for the dive side of the mix up, you've got blazing, which is +1 power, which does not stun sweep, but it does have ignore armor, which means it deals with focus. Is that
Deals with
correct?
focus and block.
And okay, and then putting fierce on it means that you're dealing with sweep.
Yep.
So you can't cover with dive as your play, you can't cover every slow normal, but you can cover.
You can cover every slow normal if you really want to, but usually you want to save this
Okay. Right. Okay.
because this solves more problems for you. Usually it's fine if the first
Definitely.
strike, because often this kind of thing, the opponent is going to be like, all right, maybe it's fine if I just cross out, and so you don't want to like throw away a card you really want to be able to boost with a little bit later. Now,
Right.
if they cross
And
out, you're
I'm
fine because at that point we have established this board position
you're
which is fantastic for you,
right. And but you would, in order to get that board position, you would rather have spent this and this
and
than
still hold this because it's
this
going to be useful in
and
a minute.
this.
Yeah,
Yes. Understood.
generally
Okay.
speaking.
So you throw your mix up at range 4 at the beginning of the game, which means that presumably I'm mulliganing for some combination of the cards that are on the table right now.
You're making sure that you have
Um,
one of these 4
yep,
options,
yep.
and then
Because I don't need all of
you
them.
don't need all of them. You just need to make sure you play
Right.
all of them sometimes across all the games you play, right? And then you want to have a boost you can throw onto it, and usually it's going to be a power boost. You also want to look at this if your opponent has a fast fireball. So Ryu actually, without
Mhm.
gauge, doesn't. But if your opponent
Yep.
has a speed 5 or greater opener, then you want to look for exoskeleton or its cousin defense,
Yep.
so that your seismic hammer can deal with their fast fireballs.
Specifically a fast fireball, or is this also applicable for things like dive attack on beheaded, like a fast dive?
It is depending on exactly how they're shaped. So Dive Attack is an example. Dive Attack and Crystal Strike are both cards that will trade with Seismic Hammer because of how they push on hit, right? If your
Right.
opponent has Moonfall on Selinka's kit, which is just speed 5 before advance 3, then this is not going to be nearly as useful.
Right, because it goes underneath the range shadow of seismic hammer,
Yeah. And in those
and the
cases,
guard doesn't help
yeah,
that.
in those cases you prefer to have this because the armor means you're cutting your losses, and the after means that you'll be
Right.
able to reposition in a way that's favorable to you.
Right, into hopefully the range that you want anyway.
Yeah, which does
Okay,
also mean
that all makes sense.
that you will occasionally play exoskeletal dive,
Right.
because you are threatening the seismic hammer, and honestly,
Right.
Usually exoskeletal dive still fares well into fast fireballs. It just doesn't fare as well into fast dives.
Sure.
Because of how
Yep.
positioning kicks out.
Yep. So this boost threatens seismic hammer, but because we're talking about mix-ups here, sometimes when you play one, just because you're threatening it doesn't mean that you should play it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, keep an eye on what kind of opponent you think you're up against and what kind of cards you think they are likely to be holding and what cards you think they're going to waste.
Yep.
Yeah, you do generally like if the opponent crosses out against a low commitment strike, because it's better than them crossing out against a high commitment strike. People only have so many copies of cards, so you go, all right,
Yep.
well, one fewer of that means that I can blow you up more easily later.
When I really pump everything I've got into it,
Yeah,
you won't have an escape anymore.
yeah. Like if the opponent throws away both copies of a focus or a cross or a grasp, it renders them far more susceptible to you going, oh, it turns out I can make an interesting little checkmate here. Please take 8.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and that's a thing that is obviously fantastic for you. Most opponents are going to be a little bit more careful with their options, but part of being a rushdown character is your goal is to kill them before they get to go through their deck and get all their options. Like
I see.
you
Right.
want to be playing at a faster pace than them. You want to draw through your deck faster than they draw through theirs, because then you'll get all of the ammo you need to dump on them before they draw all of their shield, as it were.
Right. That makes sense. Okay.
hmm Relatedly,
So we're at range 4. Sorry, continue.
yeah. Relatedly, here's another very strong claim. Boost this every chance you get.
Oh, stylish. Yep.
Yep.
For the reload.
Yes, because you draw 3 cards, you take another action, and
Yep.
that's essential. That's part of how you don't prepare, is you make sure that you keep your tempo high. Now, I say every chance you get. There actually are some caveats here. Stylish, in a sense, will be wasted if you push yourself to a high enough hand size while you are building to your 3rd gauge, that then your reload is going to burn 4 or 5 cards into your discard pile. So you would
Right.
rather hold a stylish or 2 sometimes, so that after you exceed, you can use stylish after you exceed. But yes,
And then after I've dumped some more cards, so maybe 2 turns after the exceed when I've dropped a bunch more cards on it.
mhm, right, and well, or so no, because once you've exceeded, you should never have to worry about your hand size again. Um, you're striking every turn. If you are not
Okay.
striking, it's because your opponent ran so far away that you had to spend resources to move after them, which means that you will be dropping probably below 7 anyway.
Okay.
But like you
And
reload
so
to 7, you don't hesitate to boost, draw 3 cards. Sorry, you exceed your reload. Cool.
yep.
Now you're at 8 cards. Sorry, I can't do math. 6 plus 3 is 9. Yes?
Yep.
Very good.
That's true. It is.
All right, cool. Well, in that case, you're at 9 cards because you go 7 minus
Yep.
1 plus 3. And then you boost again, ideally. And 8 plus 3 is 11. Yes? Have we got this right? All right,
Mhm.
good. Just checking. And now you are at 11 cards in hand, which means you probably can look at your hand and go, all right, back to that alchemy question of what attack do I want to play in this situation? I probably have it. Great. What boost do I want to play with it? I probably have it. And there's a very good
Oh,
chance that you have an EX attack.
I think that I was a couple of steps behind you there, D. That take another action because it means strike means that you won't be discarding at end of turn.
Yes,
So
sorry.
the reason that you okay, no, I got you. I got you.
After the turn in which you take the exceed action, for every turn for the rest of the game, you probably never worry about hand size because you're going to be striking every turn.
Okay.
And if you're not striking, it's because you had to do something to chase after your opponent, which means that probably you ended up boosting cross or paying a bunch of force.
Right.
And if that happened, well, you paid a bunch of force. You probably aren't at your maximum hand size anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is a concept that I'm only familiar with from we haven't gotten to it yet, but Big Hand Guile. The get a million cards in your hand, and then because you're always striking, you're never gonna discard. Similar idea here, but from the take another action rider on this boost rather than the exceed effect itself.
Right. Right. Yeah. This
Okay.
boost is you will end up striking at some time during this turn. In almost all cases. Usually, the take another action is I will now play another continuous boost and then I will strike.
And then
Uh,
you'll strike. Okay.
Yep. And one of the spiciest pieces of playing Viper is when you do this at range 3 and you go, okay, well, now you boost either light or fierce, and you strike. And your opponent has to decide, do they think you are going to play a on-curve spike that is unbeatable, or an above-curve dive that is unbeatable, or a, 8-power sweep, which is not unbeatable, but
does more.
but does way, way more payout, or burning kick, right, which gains advantage and is 6 power, maybe speed 7, depending on what it is that you're playing against. Like, you have a million options and a million threats. And just because they have plus 3 power, usually, is not going to be a huge issue for you. You do need to pay attention to when your opponent has above curve options. If they have something that's like a speed, like, okay, Ryu with Gauge has a speed 6 option at range 3. Cool. So now you do the same thing I just described, but you play an EX attack. If you think it's magical to say you just have an EX attack, no, if you're playing stylish every chance you get, you have EXs.
You have enough cards in your hand that you're just going to have them.
Right. And if you go, man, my 2 stylishes on the bottom card on the bottom of my deck, that's how we will talk about how we mitigate my Viper weaknesses, because Viper is actually one of the characters who is more volatile, meaning that she is sensitive to the order of her deck. You have to actually play her differently if you don't run into any of her, any of these or this, right? If none of these are in your opening hand and you mull and none of them are in your opening hands, you actually have to play Viper differently. And for a lot of characters, it's not really the case, but she is very, very rush down. You actually do need to adjust your line of play if you don't have your aggro tools right from the bat. Something that I don't love that being the case, but that's rush down life. But yeah, usually you can get one of them, right? You get five or six cards, and you mulligan 5 or 6 cards, and you probably will get something.
Yeah, statistically, there's enough cards in this opening mix-up that one of them's probably going to pop up.
Most likely, but sometimes it doesn't. And when that happens, that's got to talk about that. Let me also note that you do have more than 2 copies of Stylish. Here's the other one.
Yep. Okay.
There are times that you will use Cheater for things other than Stylish. Sometimes you need a Light. Sometimes you need a Fierce. Sometimes you need Exoskeletal. Sometimes you need Blazing, right? This is... I can't give you a quick and dirty of exactly what you should use Cheater for, because Cheater is there to solve your problems. In whatever situation you are in, if you have a boost in your discard pile that will solve your problem, use Cheater, play it, do what you need to do. I find usually my problem is that I don't have Stylish in my hands, and so I use Cheater to play Stylish.
And then you're going to have you'll be able to answer a lot more problems per minute,
right,
when you've got that many cards in your hand,
right. And so I'll build more cards, and so yeah. All right, so like I said, there's no quick and dirty for when to play Cheater, because it does a lot of things. I like to use it for Stylish. Always play Stylish. Most of her boosts you can use a lot of situations. Her most situational character-specific boost is actually this one. It's on a deceptively good attack, and the reason this is so situational is because it costs a force, and it is on Seismic Hammer, which is a really important card for her to have. Against opponents who are happy to stick to range 1, 2, 3, this card's way less important. It's still decent, because it still tends to be... I probably should explain why this card is not speed 1 in Exceed mode. If you haven't hovered it, please hover that Exceed ability.
Yep, I gotcha. That if you do, your attack is critical. We flip. This is speed 4 for free, because of the +3 speed on the critical.
Yeah, I glossed right over that. But when you're in Exceed mode, you use your ability probably every turn, and because you do that, you also have all your critical effects.
Yep. So we've got a hit, draw 3 card on Temple Massage. We've got -2 power, gain advantage. We've got a ignore guard.
And then this is the other one.
Yes, and then this is +4 speed. Or sorry, +3 speed for a maximum for a total of 4. Okay.
Yep. And it's particularly big on this because it means that things like EX Seismic Hammer at range 3 or 4, with a boost in play, just like, put Blazing on this, play EX, and now you have an on-curve 7 power ignore armor.
Yep. Okay, so that beats everything in the game, probably.
It beats everything, right?
Yep.
And before you Exceed, you still can play this with Defend or Exoskeletal, or from range 4 or 5 where you're trying to cover something, cover sweep, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But in Exceed mode, it's like, okay, that's a speed 4, 2 to 5 with a great after effects. If the opponent has a fast projectile, you can still beat it if you put Light out. If they don't, then you can throw power on this and you just get a free hit. Very often, the way that you will win the game, like kill the opponent, is that you played Blazing Seismic Hammer at range 5, because they forgot that you could, from range 2, play Cross. Like, man, Viper played Cross. Weird. Viper never wants to play Cross as an attack. She's at range 5. She can't do anything at range 5. Oh, right.
Oh no.
Yeah, at range 5, she sure can do something, and it's killing you.
But it requires kind of a specific setup. Well, I mean, not that specific. She has enough card draw and enough boosts that she can probably make this happen when she needs to.
There you go, right? So anything that you look at, you go,
Right.
man, you're talking about having these specific cards in hand. It's a miracle if you have them. No, it isn't. Stylish draws 3. Viper draws 5. Cheater, if you
Yep.
want to, draws 3.
Yep.
And that's not even
You
all
have
of the
two
draw.
copies of you have 2 copies of both of those. You can probably make this happen if you try hard enough.
Right. So like you get to the bottom of your deck faster than your opponent, and that means that you are going to have what you need if you want it.
Right. And then so maybe you get to the bottom of your deck, you've already played 1 copy of Seismic Hammer earlier in the game, you hold on to the other one, and then you burn through your deck again and find it again.
Yep.
Yep.
There is
That
one
makes
other
sense.
piece of draw I haven't mentioned in weapons.
Yep.
This is the boost that you play, and we're talking about all the boosts first. This is not really a coincidence. Anyway, this is the boost that you play when you drew nothing that you wanted. This is the I don't have Stylish. I don't have a force efficient way to move in. I don't have block, seismic, dive. I just hidden weapons. I spent a turn to get a gauge, just like I would from striking in most situations, or just like I wanted to from striking at least. You know, there's no guarantee that you win whatever mix up you're throwing. But like, you spend a turn to get a gauge is exactly what you wanted to do. And this lets you say, well, what's the worst card in my hand? Throw it into my discard pile. And now I'm drawing a card to replace it and a card to replace emergency combination. It's basically change cards too, but you also get a gauge.
And a gauge, sure. Okay.
Yep.
And so and you would rather do other things with your turn, but sometimes you can't, and this is the play.
Yeah. This is one of those,
almost like it's an emergency.
Yeah, you go, okay, my opponent did something silly, and we're at range like 6+. Well, if they don't have a projectile to threaten me with, and they just are like happy dirtling in the corner, and I don't have Crossed or Seismic Hammer to move in force efficiently, I might still consider playing Dive or Assault just to move in anyway. But like, I'm playing block or I'm playing hidden weapons because I need gauge. I need gauge ASAP. Because once I get to 3 gauge, I can throw my entire hand to move next to you because then I can exceed, and then I have a full hand again. Like,
and you're ready to kill them.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so we've discussed the kind of idea of this we've come back a couple times to the strategic linearity thing. Where we're at right now is you're starting at range 4, you play one of these options, you move to range 3. In the next few turns, you build up gauge, you exceed, and now you proceed to kill them.
Yes.
That's about and reload where appropriate when you can get the most value out of it. Use your boosts to reload more.
Yeah. By default, reload constantly, but think carefully about when you're going to exceed, because you can make things awkward for yourself if you use Stylish before you exceed, and then you exceed and dump 4 cards.
Right. Okay. So I think that you're probably going to get here anyway, but I wanted to, because right now where we're at is like, all right, we've moved into range 2 to 3, and then there's a bunch of flashing lights and loud sounds, and then my opponent is dead.
Yep.
So I think we should analyze those flashing lights and loud sounds a little bit more closely by going through the attacks themselves. But as you said, we're talking about the boosts first for a reason here.
Yep. Correct. And yes, that is so. Those flashing lights and loud sounds are talking through how you use each of her attacks and what you staple each of her boosts to in detail, so that you know what are my alchemical ingredients that I'm combining to craft new and exciting things.
Correct.
Let's see. Have I missed any boosts? I think we have talked about every boost.
Yeah, other than the normals, which are, I mean, you got light, you got fierce, you got defend, and those are all super valuable staple on stats as well.
Yeah, and those are the 3. Light. I mean, these are the 3 continuous boosts in normals. Is light, fierce, and defend. So defend is budget exoskeleton. Fierce is side grade electrifying and side grade blazing. And light is unique. And light.
Oh, she doesn't have any speed boosts.
That's correct.
It never even occurred to me. Yep. Okay.
She's oops all power boosts, and she only has on or below curve, which means that light serves a distinct role, which is that if you absolutely need to be faster, you can. And so very often this is where people go, okay, my opponent played +2 speed. Well, like any normal person can play neutral here. I'm Viper. I'm not doing that. I'm going to play my own +2 speed so that we are even
and hit them
and
right
then
away.
strike. So that I'm now winning the speed side instead of losing the speed side. Or Very, very commonly, you go stylish, stylish. My opponent has +6 power, but it doesn't matter because I'm playing speed 5 spike or speed 6 dive, and
Okay. And
they
just
can't do
just
anything about it.
completely stopping them, and they can't touch it. Okay.
Yeah, it's like my opponent has +6 power, but that's a lie because they cannot hit me.
Right. And I also heard you mention sweep is an important mix-up option that,
Mhm,
plus two power stunning focus, like
mhm.
considerations like that. So sweep is still useful as an attack for Viper, but it,
Yes.
is it fair to say that that plus two speed boost is more valuable, or should it be a case by case?
So the short answer is case by case, and the long answer is save a copy. Um,
Okay.
as in you might and that doesn't have to be a copy of Sweep. As a reminder, one of these two cards
Even
is a
cheat.
copy of Light.
Yep.
So it's fine to use a Sweep early if you know that you have a Temple Massage coming, one or two, because you can dig a Sweep out of your discard pile and boost with it, and then now you have Light again, right?
Right.
So this gives you some redundancy and some grace on how you spend Sweep, because even if you throw something horrific like Electrifying EX Sweep, which is usually like an immense waste of resources, you can still dig Light out of your discard pile next turn. Um,
Right.
and hey, I said waste of resources, but is it a waste if you dealt 11 damage?
Yeah. Electrifying EX sweep sounds very spicy to me.
Yeah, the trick by the other catch I haven't mentioned electrifying, I kind of alluded to it when I said they don't know how many ultras you have. This is you unless you're about to reload through your exceed mode, you probably are ditching first time to pay the force cost here.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
this card is a great source of 2 force. Uh,
Yep. But it's never going to be an attack. You've mentioned exoskeleton as a very useful boost, especially in
mm,
the early game, and I'm sure we'll get into more use cases for it in a second. But this is often force because she needs cards.
yep, yeah, and you'll
Yep.
often if you're in exceed mode already, then you'll often spend gauge on electrifying instead of cards from hand because
Okay.
you
Because she doesn't need the gauge to crit because she's critting for free.
Right, you never spend gauge on crits unless you are desperate for a defensive crit where you're like, "Man, I know this is a sweep, so I'm gonna play a defensive crit mid-speed, Thunder or Temple Massage, and win
Sure.
the game because I did that." Um,
Yep.
but you better be real sure about your read if you're doing that, because you are committing a very good card and a gauge, and
Without a
usually
boost to make it better.
yeah, without a thing
Yep.
to make it awesome, and you're saying, "I'm committed to winning a strike in my opponent's turn." Usually, what Viper says when the opponent strikes is, "Okay, I'll fold. I lose the strike, whatever," and she wild swings.
Yep. Yep.
Um, she is also perfectly fine to play at range 1, focus, block, sweep, normals that are good on
Yep.
defense. She usually does not play her own cards on defense. They are not very good on defense. Um,
Right.
and she's fine doing that because she wins on her turn. So she says, "All right, on your turn, I'll lose all the strikes. On my turn, I'm just gonna hit you for, 6 to 10 damage every turn." Um,
Every turn. Yep. Okay. And you said at the very beginning of this lesson, D, that when Viper first came out, you tried to make something happen with defensive set play where maybe you boost and then don't strike, and it just didn't happen.
Right, because I thought of it as, well, imagine, how good is it to have 1 boost in play when you strike? Well, isn't it obviously better to have 2? And if you go
Sure.
and according to the defensive set play mindset, which I'm not gonna talk about in at length here, but we talked about in the other video actually, you go,
Yep. In the
"Okay,
Akuma video.
if I boost, then my opponent can't strike into me because they know I'm gonna win the strike."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
well, then my next turn comes around and I already have a boost in play, and they've either tried to diffuse my advantage by moving to a different range or played their own boost. But now, knowing what they did in response, I can customize my advantage by playing a second boost and then leading to a strike from there.
Right.
Here's the problem. You put a boost into play and you pass turn, and your opponent strikes, and you are Sea Viper. So you look at the strike and you look at your cards and you go, "Oh, I'm still losing the strike." Uh,
This doesn't actually help that
yeah,
much.
like light's good, but man,
Hmm.
I sure am committing to being safe and dealing 3 to 4 damage with light instead of guaranteeing 5 damage with light, right? Like, why am I doing
Right.
this? And if the answer is because I really am desperate for having a hands and drawing cards at end of turn, then my answer is you need to be playing more stylish. Uh,
Okay.
more stylish, more hidden weapons, and gets your exceed. Um,
Yep. So just lean on her card draw and stop giving your opponent turns.
yep. Yeah, so the
Yep.
so strategic linearity. Your line is you get into a range where you can play. You love the center 3 spaces of the arena. You want to be on the side closer to the opponent. But the reason you love the center 3 is because if you are here, the farthest your opponent is range 5, where you can still
Which
hit
is
them.
still seismic hammer range.
Yeah, you don't want to be at range 6 or greater, where you can't do anything.
Okay.
So you like the center 3. You're going to want to be here or here, depending on where your opponent is. You want to be closer to your opponent. It's fine to move in a little bit, but just be careful of getting them too much room to escape.
Right.
And then you love throwing range 3 mix-ups, which are really horrifying for your opponent to respond to. And we'll talk about that with the flashing lights and bright shiny colors and all that. But yeah,
Yep.
so that's what you're doing, and then you spend your hands, you exceed to reload your hands, and then you continuously spend your hands, and you never run out of hand because you're stylish until the opponent dies. There's your
Yep.
strategic line. You never play ultras because you never can. This card is boosted every time you have it, so you'll never have it as an attack. This card costs 4 gauge, and if you have hit them 7 times, 3 to exceed, and then 4 to get the 4th gauge, they're probably dead.
Yep.
Like how is that happening, and you actually still have enough life to do this? Besides which, you probably already paid this as force and electrifying, or you boosted it so that you could play assault, or dive, or whatever.
Right.
So like, how do you still have burst time and 4 gauge? It's not happening. The other occasion in which you might have 4 gauge and burst time is when you will look at the board in the hand and go, oh, I have 4 gauge and burst time in hand, and I have like 1 or 2 other cards in hand. That sounds like a great time to change cards. I'll pay 4 force from
Yeah.
gauge, burst time from hand,
Yeah.
spend 6 force, draw 6 cards, draw 1 for a turn, and then pitch whatever I don't like.
Right.
Like that's just better
So
than
it
throwing something into burst time.
even when you have the possibility of doing stun immune 10 damage, um, it's still a better option to just spend it as force most of the time.
Yeah, by default. By default.
Okay.
And that's because I
So
emphasize really high tempo, really high aggression, right?
right. So I wanna pause here for a second. And as we've been talking about strategic linearity, I have also heard you say that uh, Viper is an incredibly difficult character to play well,
Yes.
and it strikes me that unless I think in a second we're about to get into tactical flexibility, and that's where this is going to come in. The two seem to be contradictory, right? This is a very linear character. This is a character who has a very established line. She should be very easy to play. That's not the case.
Yep, that is not the case.
Okay. And you also mentioned that we were going to talk about some weaknesses in that in this line of play that we need to learn how to address, which is going to add to that complexity, I'm sure. But just as a blanket statement, just because you know what to do with the character doesn't mean that you know how to do it. Is that fair?
Right. And knowing
Yeah.
the strategy doesn't mean you can execute it.
Right.
You can go, okay, my plan is throw strong mix-ups. Okay, well, how do you consistently throw strong mix-ups? Well, you study offensive theory in great detail, and you understand that option preservation, option management, maintaining a mix-up, and knowing what cards have drops, and watching your opponent's behavior, and figuring out what they think
Yep.
you're going to play because of the cards you spent to get to a certain position. And like that's how you run offense effectively. Effective offense is actually very difficult to run and exceed.
Yes.
And
And
Viper
and if you can't
epitomizes that.
if you can't do that, Viper has nothing else. There's
Yep.
nothing else to fall back on to be a cushion or a crutch um to help you with your sort of meager understanding of offensive pressure. That's what you have, and you have to use it.
Exactly. Viper is a wonderfully
Gotcha.
flexible toolkit of things that let you be really aggressive.
Right. So she's different kinds of hammers. She doesn't have a screwdriver. She doesn't have a saw. She's just like a lot of different ways to hit something.
Yeah, yeah, everything's a hammer. Her hammer is plus power. Um,
Yep.
and she's going to find all kinds of interesting ways to put plus power on all kinds of interesting things and then hit you with it. Um, but if you show her any other thing, she's going to look at it in confusion. She does not know how to handle screwdrivers, etc.
Hey, gotcha.
But yes. So yeah, strategic linearity. But I think she's actually very, very difficult because running effective offense is very difficult because it requires you to pay attention to literally all of the options all the time. Because
Mhm.
if you let you because defense is easier. If you look at your opponent's discard pile and you go, oh, they can't be playing spike, then I can play focus and I'm safe. Then I can play block and I'm safe. Then I can play sweep and I'm
Right.
safe. Uh, then you'll do that. People like being risk averse by default. Most people do at least, and
Yep.
folks tend to have an easy time identifying what they're the most afraid of. And when it's gone, they go, "Oh, I don't have to worry about that I was so afraid of. So now I can play my safe conservative options." And so they will, which means that you, as the person who is the offensive player, needs to go, my opponent must never feel safe. If my
Okay.
opponent feels safe, I'm doing it wrong, right? Or if they feel safe and they're wrong about it, then I'm happy, right? So it's fine if the opponent thinks they're
Right.
safe and they play a thing, and then you stun them and they go, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because no one would ever expect you
And
to
then
be
they
crazy enough to play stylish grasp
right.
because it loses you
And
so
and
many
then
things.
and then they feel less safe later because not only did they just lose a strike, but clearly they're fighting a crazy person.
Yes. And they
Right.
yeah, suddenly realize that every side of the mix-up is on the table, which is where Exceed is at its
Yes.
best, is when both players actually understand that everything is part of the game. Um,
Yes.
I will issue one little caveat, by the way, since I just mentioned the stylish grass play. Um, there is a role that burst time can fill. It is when you have multiple stylishes in play, and you have the life to spend. So you
Oh.
go, okay,
Okay.
I can trade, right? Uh,
Even with plus 6 power or
yeah,
something.
my opponent can deal whatever 10 damage to me, 12 damage to me. That's fine. They're dead,
Yes.
right? This is a very rare occurrence, but when I have seen burst time used in hyper aggressive Sea Viper lines, that's how. Is I saw stylish light burst time, and you have suddenly a speed 4 burst time that the opponent can try to outspeed, and specifically in this board state, it does not lose to grasp.
Right.
Yep. You go, okay, well, if they don't have cross, they are just dead. Um, there's not much they can do about that. Now, again, you have to have the life to spend. You have to have the gauge to spend. You probably have better things to do with your life and your gauge. But
Yep.
that's the niche. I would be remiss if I didn't mention there was a niche for burst time, which I think I can now segue into talking about all the other attacks, which are way less niche. Uh,
Sure.
I'll also mention the other reason Burning Dance is niche is, besides the fact that you want to play stylish all the time, this is an on-curve ignore armor that does 5 damage.
Yep.
Okay, so is Assault.
Yep. When you have blazing on it,
Yeah,
and that's a heck of a lot less gauge.
yeah, like the existence of Blazing makes it harder to play Burning Dance, because if you need the ignore armor, you have it. The
Right.
one time I've ever played Burning Dance that wasn't oops checkmate because my opponent wasn't paying attention and I just need 5 power ignore armor. The one time I played Burning Dance and was like, yeah, I specifically needed Burning Dance was to dodge, I think it was Cyrus's Dredge Fury, where I played a speed 5 after
Okay.
close 8. And Cyrus played an Ultra and went, oh, my Ultra is speed 4, so I guess you close to range 1 and I miss.
Right.
Didn't expect that.
So you didn't even hit.
Nope.
This was just a very expensive reposition to dodge an
Yep.
ultra.
I mean, it was actually not that expensive because I paid 3 gauge and 2 force to move 5 or 6 spaces. I don't remember exactly how many. I think it was
Yeah.
5 spaces.
Yeah.
So it was
That
exactly what
that
I would pay
is
for it.
right. Yeah. You just got to do it during a strike.
Yes, I did it during a strike. But that is
Okay.
very, very niche, right?
Right. And you're looking at that the whole time, and you're like, man, stylish is a really good boost. I should be playing it that way instead.
Yeah,
But that's the time that it is helpful is when your back's literally in this case against the wall and you need to move in.
yeah. Like that's the okay. You're allowed to play this as an attack if you exactly need what this attack is. You're allowed to play this as an attack if you need exactly what this attack is. Uh, don't
Right.
expect that to happen very often. It's going to be about. It should be slightly more common than you taking the prepare action.
Okay. Which should be literally
Which
never.
should be literally never.
So
Yes.
this is almost never.
Yes, this is a step below never. Exactly. Or a step above never.
Gotcha.
Above never.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Above. Um,
Gotcha.
not below never. But yeah. All right. So those are the niches for those attacks. I've already talked about the boosts. I will be a little more explicit with exoskeleton. The default exoskeleton pairing. Let me just grab our little da-da-da, is this card. Um, because, well, assault is probably going to trade anyway if you don't think you're
Yep.
calling out the opponent being cheeky with something. And if they look at
Yep.
your cards and you played this card, they're like, all right, well, it's probably not Spike. It's probably assault, an on curve attack that gains advantage, or an on curve attack that gains advantage, or an
Right.
on curve. Where's the other one? An on curve attack that doesn't gain advantage but does 5 damage. So they go, all right, we'll play a sweep or a focus or whatever, and you go, all right, sure. I got my advantage, and I took no damage. Right? You took probably 1 damage,
Right.
maybe 3 if they played smite.
Right.
If it's burning kick, you trade even better because burning kick gives them -2 power. So
Yep. And when you were saying they're saying it's probably not Spike, that's just because Exoskeleton doesn't really particularly help Spike
it doesn't change any spike
because
interactions, right?
because if they're not getting out of the way or outspeeding Spike, it's just going to hit him anyway.
Yep. Yeah.
Spike does not often trade.
Right. It does mean that you can play it with Spike and go, man, even if I lose this strike, I'm taking almost no damage, so that's fine.
Right.
And then the other thing that you'll play this for, as I've already alluded, is dive at range 4 or greater, but mostly at 4,
Right.
where you're going, okay, they aren't going to hit me with their speed 5 thing and stun me. I will still get to move. So it's useful in all these things where you go, I'm kind of expecting to get hit either before or after.
Right.
Rarely in the late
See,
game, you'll attach it to like a focus where you go, I really, really need the life lead here, but it's mostly going to be for these things.
okay. So and these are all things that the in these two cases in particular, uh, securing the hit means that you've also secured advantage. This just helps you do that
Right. Well,
safely,
and
rather
yeah,
without being
say
stunned out.
it usually doesn't so much help you secure the hit unless you're playing at range 1, where you're going, okay, I can play this into a and they won't play grasp, because if you play this at range 1, the opponent goes, well, I'm not playing grasp then, right?
Yeah, because
Because
I won't do any
I'll deal no
damage.
damage. But if you play
Right.
it at range 3 and you go, okay, if they sweep or focus, I'm going to take way less damage. So I'm just making sure that
Yep.
I lose less on the trade in return for what I want, which is advantage and range 1 or 2, depending on whether you played assault or burning kick.
Okay.
And that's fine. Um, so these are kind of the pairings for that boost. Um, stylish goes with everything, obviously, but no, I
Yep.
should actually mention that it's not so obvious, because when you have stylish up and you go, man, my opponent has +6 power, I really got to make sure that I win this next strike. Um, Firstly, no, you don't actually. It's great if you win the next strike, but your worst case is not that you lose the strike that you have 2 stylishes in play. Your worst case is that you commit to winning it and then still lose it anyway.
I see.
Which means that if you have 2 stylishes in play and you go, okay, I really desperately need to win this strike, I'm going to boost light and play cross. And now
Right.
you're at range 5. If you don't have seismic hammer in hand, you lost that strike.
I see. Okay. So you just spent your stylishes getting all of your stuff back, and now you are positioning negative on a strike that you just put a ton of stuff into.
Right. So then you go, oh, if you have seismic hammer, that's another matter because you can move back in. But if you go, okay, I ducked out, I'm safe, but now I have to throw away those cards I just drew to get back into a range where I can play,
Right.
and it costs me a
Right.
turn, and the opponent's going to spend that time redrawing cards or building the setup or whatever.
And losing tempo in the process. So you have successfully won the strike, but you've maybe lost the or
You've lost
avoided losing the
the
strike,
exchange, but yeah, you
but
didn't lose the
but
strike,
you've lost the
but you
exchange.
lost the exchange, and you go, okay, that wasn't worth it.
Understood.
Now instead you can say, okay, I'm going to play this with Spike, and then the opponent plays EX Assault, and you take what, 11 damage, I think.
You take a lot of damage.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
and
take it's 11.
yeah, and you don't have light anymore, and you go, oh, that was excruciating. Was that really worth throwing the light on? Uh, so it's a little dicey. Now on the other hand, if you play something like light assaults or uh, fierce EX assaults or something like that with this, then you'll have advantage. And that means you can go, okay, I'm going to hit for 4 to 6 damage, depending on 4 to 7 damage, depending on exactly what you played. But I'm going to have advantage.
Right.
And then my opponent's going to hit me back for like 10 damage. But I have
Yep.
advantage.
Yep. Yep. And you've also been able to set the terms for the next strike by moving into the range that you want.
Right. And you go, okay,
With the
they
assault.
didn't get a turn. So what you did was you said, I'm paying 6 life to draw 6 cards.
Yep.
And now it's
Yeah.
my turn again. We both got a gauge. Depending on the opponent, that may or may not be a problem. Some people value gauge actually more than you do. You value your first 3 gauge a lot, and then gauge after that is just force.
Right.
But like, you can go, okay, a few times it's fine for me to pay 6 life to draw 6 cards, as long as I know that the next 2 strikes I win, I'm dealing 4, 5, 6 damage, and they're doing nothing.
It never would have occurred to me, D, for people who are maybe just cherry picking these guides as they find them on YouTube later. The last one that D and I did was on Akuma, and Akuma has a boost called Demon Illusion that is spend up to 5 life to draw
Mhm.
up to 5 cards. It never would have occurred to me that Stylish basically says that, but the life you're paying is from your opponent hitting you.
Right. Like it's that, but
Okay.
it might not even have a life cost if you do actually
Right.
win the
If you
strike.
right. Okay. That is, and we spent a lot of time in the Akuma guide especially for Rushdown Akuma, talking about how important Demon Illusion is and how you should always pay 5 life for it.
Yep.
Okay. So that puts into perspective maybe any of the sort of buyer's remorse you might have for getting hit after dropping Stylish.
Yep.
If you were playing Akuma, that'd be fine. You would be happy to take the 5 life, and you would have done it on your turn, not during a strike.
Yep. Yeah, the thing you don't want
Good to
is that
know.
you committed an important boost in an important attack and you still lost because the opponent was ready for it.
Right.
And so usually you're not going to stylish when the opponent has their own light already out and you have nothing, where you're like, they have +2 speed, can bring us back to baseline and then strike where we're both at neutral, but they have +6 power. Might still be worth it, but you probably want to throw exoskeletal at that instead of light and just say, yeah, I'm
Just
taking
to
less
try to,
damage, but like these are
yeah.
nixing where I go, okay, you have 3 extra power, I have 3 extra armor, but I got 2 extra cards out of the deal, so it's
Right.
fine.
Okay, so yeah, you're counting up your value in different ways, where cards kind of equal life, and neither of them equal turns, and there's complicated math going on, but you're looking for value when you're playing these
Yeah,
boosts.
and I will say, but yeah, so that's the like assurance is that don't panic if you play stylish unreservedly, and know that even if you ended up trading down a ton, it's probably fine.
Okay.
Now, what you would prefer is not to trade down. To that end, let me direct you to Electrifying Assault, which is on curve, and you can have up to 8 power, which means that if the opponent plays Focus or Sweep, you can stun it.
Yep.
Um, Assault is still risky because the opponent could be holding EX Assault, unless you know for a fact they could not be. And so you will tend
Okay.
to like playing EX Assaults with Electrifying, or if you can, Fierce EX Assaults, which only loses to
Yep.
Focus.
And notably, you're making these calls after you've drawn the
Yes.
cards from Stylish. There's a decent chance that you wind up with these cards that you need, which goes back to the thing that you were saying earlier about, man, isn't it convenient that you're always talking about how you're always talking as though you have these cards in hand. You might after the Stylish
Yeah.
play.
Like if you have neither of these in hands and you Stylish twice, you probably have at least one. And if you still have neither, well, maybe you have your other assaults or your other assaults.
Right.
Which Burning Kick
So
is not quite the same because you have to be in Exceed mode for it to gain advantage. Emergency Combination is not quite the same, although with Fierce, with the power in play, it is very, very close because at range 3, this now beats Focus because it doesn't move in. And if you have at
right.
least +2 power, it beats Sweep by stunning. So this becomes a lot closer to Assaults in most cases if you're playing it on curve.
Right. So the answer for Stylish to avoid taking that trade broadly is an on curve speed 5 option with a lot of power stapled
Yeah,
onto
on
it.
or above curve with enough power that it can't trade with anything.
Yep.
That is far better for you than playing Grasp. Sorry, I said cross. I'm cross. This card here.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, Grasp is actually fine. Grasp or EX Grasp with Electrifying. I've actually see this not uncommonly where it's like just before Exceed, Stylish EX Grasp Stylish Electrifying EX Grasp. Dump your entire hands for an 8 power attack. Exceed to reload.
Yep.
And that's tidy. It does
Yep.
cost you 2 Fierces and Electrifying, which is kind of a lot of power boost, but you know, you got to
But
hit for
you're
8
gonna
power at speed 8. That's pretty good.
and maybe you'll see them again because you're going through your deck so fast you might reshuffle.
Right.
But it sounds like the key to a lot of these situations is being able to put on 4 power when you need to with Electrifying.
Yeah, or 2
That
power
is that's what's
or 2 power with an
right.
EX.
Right. Okay, so again, with what we talked about in the Akuma video, 3 is kind of the magic number to make Assault safe into Sweep.
Mhm.
Emergency Combination has 5 with the continuous boost, plus 2 more is 7 as well.
Yep, break Sweep, and then at range 3, it doesn't get hit by Focus because of positioning.
Yep. Okay. So that's we're talking about magic numbers again.
Yep.
That's how we're making these attacks safe. Gotcha.
Yep. And so that tends to be what you'll do there. You can, of course, as I've already mentioned, like the default play is you play light onto Spike or Dive at range 3, and you go, okay, I have an attack
Yep.
you probably can't beat unless you have some dumb nonsense.
Yeah, stun immunity or something, or you probably can't stop ignore armor guard it on curve.
Yeah, like you need to have above curve defense to stop that. And if you have that, then I probably beat
Right.
it with Dive.
Yep.
Like that's so that is an option, and that's fine. because notably, like I mentioned before, right? Speed exists to confirm power. Power is the threat that speed
Yes.
confirms, and I don't remember the
Yes.
exact wording, but um, so you're only playing one boost per turn, which means that your light strikes are probably mostly gonna go on spike or to diffuse your opponent's boost, where they play a boost and you go, oh, I need to make sure that I still get my on curve stuff. I'm gonna play light to counter it
Right.
and then strike
Right.
because you
Okay.
can't play light and then also play fierce in the same turn. So you'd rather,
In a way that
yeah,
that makes it total. Yeah. Super above curve assault is awesome, but it's still losing to sweep just the same.
yeah,
Speed is making your mid speeds way more valuable, so it's probably going to go
yeah.
on
You'll
those.
stick it onto a mid speed if there's nothing else in play, or you'll use it to diffuse the opponent's boost setup. Like it's
Gotcha.
important. You want to have access to a copy of it for because it solves the problems it solves, but it's not really the heart of your offense at all.
Okay.
Which makes sense because light is usually, or sorry, speed and general, and light in particular, it's not usually offensive. It is defensive.
Okay. That makes
Yep.
sense.
Okay. But yeah, so that's kind of what you can do with stylish to not weep and be sad and mourn.
Right.
And let's talk through attacks. So seismic hammer, I've made a fuss over as being a really important attack. It is. Um, it's deceptively good and deceptively bad all at once. Um,
Mhm.
so from opening positions, this card, just as is, beats sweep because it's speed 1. So you hit them
Yep.
and then walk forward because they already went. They missed you. They didn't hit.
Yep.
They were
They already
faster.
went.
And that's
And so
cool.
this is part of the move no move mix up between seismic hammer and dive, except that it actually does move just so slow that it dodges the thing that stops the move option.
Exactly. And if they play focus, then you can move just one space forward to range 3, which
Just one
is still
space.
fine.
Sure.
Mhm.
Sure. So it loses really hard to dive, but most slow projectiles do anyway. So it's not.
Mhm.
I see what you mean about like deceptively good, or at least deceptively not as bad as it
Yeah,
looks.
not as bad as it
Rather.
looks, right? Like the part that's bad about it uh, is speed 1,
Yeah.
and then the crit. You go, man, this card on defense is terrible. Well, yes, this card on defense is terrible. This will
It's
never be a good
Viper.
defensive card. Uh,
Right.
the best defensive card this can be is critical EX at range 4, where it's now above curve 6 power, and that's good. It's also really
Yep.
expensive because you're critting on defense, which means you're not using your ability to do it for free. Um,
Right. Right.
mhm.
Okay. That's yeah. And two copies of the
And
card.
2 copies of the card, which is usually a pretty important card to have.
Definitely.
Yep. But yeah, so the things you generally attack on a seismic hammer as an attack here are exoskeleton for if I lose less hard, or to make it safe against
Yep.
fast projectiles, and to
Yep.
kind of ensure where you go. Okay, even if they come in, unless they play literally dive, they can poke me with something faster, and I can still do my thing, do my after effects. If they play
Set your range for your next turn.
right, like you get to do something, um, and that's not too bad. Like you can even play that at closer ranges. The thing you want to be very very careful about though is like when you telegraph something that makes them want to play sweep because exoskeletal seismic hammer still loses to sweep if you aren't in exceed mode. It's like don't do that.
Yep.
But yeah, so
Yep.
it's
Okay.
pretty commonly pairs with this. Likewise defend. Although that's like I said, that's kind of a toss up where you use exoskeleton if you need to reduce the amount by which you're trading badly. You use
Mhm.
defend if you're trying to accomplish the same interactions, but you might not trade. So Seismo, if you are going to cover a sweep, is happier with defend because it's not going to get hit by the sweep anyway, so you didn't waste an exoskeleton on it, right? Exoskeleton is just better, so you don't want to
Gotcha.
waste it if it can be. But I think
Right.
usually the way you play Seismo with either of these is when the opponent has fast pokes, and you go, okay, if they hit me, I want to take less damage. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, in Exceed mode, this thing opens up massively because this now is something where Blazing makes it a checkmate tool where a lot of people aren't going to have something that can deal with this at range 4 or 5.
Yep.
And you can just kill them. Like that just ends the game. You can't block. Sorry, you're dead. You're up against the wall. Uh,
Yep.
if you don't have Blazing, fine and good. You can still throw any other source of power on it, and you have a speed 4, power 6, 7,
You
8,
just got
9, 10, whatever.
you just have a mid speed projectile that has an after move effect.
Yep, and it's phenomenal. And if they don't have something faster than it, they just lose to it. And
Okay.
that's really good. You seldom will throw light onto it, but depends on what your opponent's up to. If your opponent is Ryu and you don't have exoskeletal and you don't have defend, sure,
Hmm.
throw light onto it, and now you have
So
a speed 6.
speed, yes, super high speed still 5 damage projectile.
Yeah, like it does a little more damage
And
than most
you
projectiles of that speed can do. So
and you mentioned that blasting is probably her least valuable boost, which means that Seismic Hammer is a very playable card
Mhm.
because you're not doing the thing where you're looking at Stylish and you're looking at the Ultra that Stylish is on and saying, maybe not. This is probably an attack
yeah,
most of the
this is
time,
usually an
right?
attack. Yeah.
Okay.
So the role that blasting fills is where you need power and you have no other power boosts, or you need
Mhm.
guard and you have no other guard boosts, or you need both at the same time, and that is rare.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing where you go, okay, hey, look, Ryu again. Not a coincidence. I pulled him out,
Mhm.
by the way. Has a bunch of 4 guard specials. I don't know where I put them, but they exist anyway.
Yep. You got Tatsu, you've got Donkey Kick.
Right. So you go, okay, well, assault loses to Tatsu and to Donkey Kick pretty handily. It also
Mhm.
loses to Shoryuken. It also loses to Grasp.
Yep.
It now
So
loses
so
to none of
you're
those
you're trying
things.
Yep, you're trying to get the over that little 4 guard hump, that sort of mini magic number before the big ones of 7 and 8,
Yep.
where you're just getting to 5 power, and that makes the things that safely trade against fast attacks way less safe.
Yep. Um,
Gotcha.
it's also useful because this is so telegraphed, right? Like you look at this at range 1, you play blasting, and your opponent goes, "Well, that's assault."
Gotcha.
And we will come back to why that's so valuable when we get to that card over there. Um,
Okay.
because that's the card where if they played a sweep or a focus, you win the game. Uh,
Yep.
like almost literally because of how much value is packed into that as a mid speed. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So blasting is usually used for assaults or to at least make something look like assaults, right? Because it's so good on assault. It's like comparably good on the assault likes for similar reasons where you go, okay, well if they have a little fast poke, then I can guard through it and then still deal enough damage to hit the breakpoints that I care about.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just doing the math on do I need this little bit of power to get over something, um, and then that's what you use it for. But it is
Okay.
less commonly used than a lot of other options, especially because it costs a force at no refunds. So it is costing more cards. That's generally going to be in Exceed mode, paid from Gauge, in basic mode, played from hand, shortly before you Exceed. So you go, okay, I'm at range 1, I can play Blasting Assault, gain advantage, guaranteed, and have no hand so that I can Exceed and reload. Like that's fine.
Right. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Thunkle, Thunder Knuckle. This is a handy mid speed. It's like kind of low reward. So,
Right.
and this is also, I will say, the special that is like most important as a defensive tool because it's kind of the only one that does anything on defense. That's an exaggeration, but um, this is the reason that you crit on defense generally, especially at range 1, where you go, okay, they're playing something like a sweep. I can commit this, and stuff them right, and say that they're actually not doing anything to me. They're getting no value out of this. It's
Sure.
barely worth what you pay for it, but if you do manage to call that sort of thing out, that's one fewer counterattack they have against everything else.
Yep.
Uh,
And this beats both sides of the or both slow normals that they'd be playing at range 1.
right.
If you're playing the 3 power also would
It's enough to get past
stun
focus.
through
Yeah, because
Focus's
yeah,
armor,
3
yeah.
over 2 is 1, so that's enough to break through the armor and deal 1 to the 0 guard if it's crit.
Right. And you and however, in those situations, they're equally likely to be playing focus on defense, and you're saying that this has utility as a defensive tool.
Right.
So
If
maybe
if
maybe that interaction doesn't come up as much as I think it
Yeah, if
does.
they're playing focus on defense, then like you need to be making sure your mix-ups are live where you could be playing Funkle sometimes, but usually you're more punishing things, or where you play like a +2 power sweep, or you play Simple
Right.
Massage over there, which like I said we'll get to, but can crush focus. Funkle,
Right.
it's fine for it to be a thing that is in your mix-up sometimes. Often electrifying is a little better, but you need to be a little careful where electrifying should not be your oh, this is clearly always my best power boost in hand. Because if you are required to pay out on it, where you go, EX grasp electrifying, and then they actually play focus, and you suddenly realize you're not in a position to pay for force because you've already exceeded and you have no stylishes, you will have no reload. Um,
Right.
that's bad, right? So like there are times where you need to deal with things way more force efficiently than with electrifying, and so
Right. And is it generally a good idea with Rekkas to just pay to the breakpoint? So if they I mean, the value here is that you kind of get to option select, right?
Yeah.
If I put electrifying onto grasp and they play, I don't know, cross, and you're like, well, I don't actually need to put any power on it at all to stun it.
Yeah. So then what you do is you look at
Um,
how many cards am I drawing next turn? Am I exceeding next turn to reload? Am I changing cards to reload? Or how much life do they have left? Because especially as Viper, and if you're in exceed mode already and you boost electrifying and you go, okay, I'm hitting. I played grasp, they played cross. I'll put them at range 3 with 5 life left because that means it's
right,
trivial to kill them.
right,
Like blazing assault just guarantees a kill. So you go,
right, right,
there you
right,
go. But if they are at 14 life, you go, well, it's a little hard to like 7 takes them down to 8. Blazing sweep doesn't deal 8 damage. Like you can't guarantee the kill next turn.
right.
So you may care about how much life they have left, but it's more commonly going to be looking more at what am I about to do? Am I going to be drawing enough cards to replace the stuff that I spend? Because like I said before, right? If you're
Right,
going to end up discarding cards, you may as well get them out of the way in advance. But if it's not the
right.
case,
R-
then don't
and
do
get value out of them.
Mhm.
Right. Okay, that makes
But
sense.
yeah, but in a general sense, though, yes, you look at this and you go, oh, they played cross, I played grasp. I'm not going to pay anything. Like that's the default for Rekkas across the game. It's just
Yeah,
that Viper has so much draw, so much reload that she's likelier to be able to justify spending to winnow down
pumping
her
it a
hand.
little bit to do more damage and to draw more
Yeah,
cards later.
convert
Okay,
cards into
that
value.
that makes sense.
hmm
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So Thunkel, as far as the alchemy side of things, obviously with light this becomes unbeatable. Where you go, oh, this is now a
Yep.
speed 7, range 1 to 2, ignore guard, 3 power. Okay, well,
Yep.
unless they are holding literally EX focus or at range 1
Yep.
literally EX grasp, right? Then I go, okay, this is 100% safe. Uh, you
Right.
can
But kind of low reward though. Still.
Right, it's low reward. Now, it might also be your cheapest way to say, okay, I have 2 stylishes out. Uh, anything else I do is super super
You're
high risk. I think I'm just gonna do this.
you're just going to mitigate the possible six power swing that they're, well, 6 power plus whatever they put on it that's going to come your
Right,
way.
you're like, okay, throwing these 2 cards away to guarantee that I drew those 6 cards for free is much better than throwing 2 cards into a mix up I might lose.
Right.
Um, and so that's this is kind of a stand-in for Light Spike where it's works at range 1. It's a little bit more reliable. It's a lot more reliable at range 2. Cost different resources, and it's fine. Like that's justifiable. So I like crit Thunkle on defense. I like offensive light Thunkle if I'm defusing stylish. Otherwise, it's super low value because
Yeah.
you're just spending your turn to deal maybe 3 damage.
Right. And electrifying's really awesome
Yeah,
as we've
like
discussed.
I would usually rather play electrifying sweep than light Thunkle. Uh,
Yeah, sure.
but yeah, that's kind of it for what Thunkle does. If against extremely tanky opponents, like you're up against somebody like Tager, then it's perfectly fine to look at Blazing Thunkle when you really need to stun something like Demon Cells, which is a +2 power, +2 armor, +2 guard boost. You're like, man,
Right.
this person really can throw 4 or more armor, 8 or more guard whenever they want.
Yep.
Let me turn that off and get
Yeah.
rid of it. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
Usually you don't need to do this, but it's how you answer that question. It is combining those. Uh,
Right.
let's see.
And so then we've got the various assault likes that we've sort of been discussing around, and then your big scary command
Yeah,
grab.
that'll be the coup de grace. We're gonna do that one last. So let me
Sure.
now go to burning kick. Bit to talk about here. Though actually, it's as we said, it's basically assault, right? It's assault with
Yeah.
effectively 6 power if it has its worst case. So the worst case for assault is that it trades. Well, okay, worst case is it gets stunned, right? But if we allow that you are not playing it in a situation where your opponent's going to beat it with something above curve. Go, all right. The
Right.
typical worst case for assault is that you run into a sweep. Well, okay. This crit effect means that the sweep deals only 4 damage. And so
Yep.
you're
So you're trading evenly,
yeah.
and gaining advantage is probably about like dropping a card.
Yeah.
It's
Advantage is
kind of a wash.
advantage is better, but
Yeah.
depending on what card you lose, you could still be pretty sad depending on what your hand size is. But
Yep.
like hopefully you're drawing a lot of cards.
Sure. Yeah.
It's also nice because at range 3, this takes you to range 2, which is generally better for you than range 1. Because of how Thunkle works, because of how generally speed breakpoints work, where you go, okay, I have Burning Kick, I have Seismic Hammer, I will have Imcom in a minute. The next one over, I'll just put it there in advance.
Yep.
Like, all of
Yep.
these don't work at range 1. Thunkle does, but again, mediocre reward. So I'd rather be at 2. So if you go from 3 to 2 and you have advantage, great. You get to keep playing mix-ups. And you also still have Spike in your mix-up, which is nice.
Yep. So Assault is a little bit more positioning negative when you pay out with it with your big scary hit, even though you would love to because it's Assault. It's, you've probably cleanly won the strike with all of your bonus power. You get advantage, but this does all that too, but you're at a better range.
Yeah, in most cases. So like
Okay.
typically when I play Viper,
Gotcha.
I prefer to throw Burning Kick as a solo card, Assault as an EX.
Okay.
Where I go, Assault can prevent them from crossing out and pressure them really close to the corner. If they cross over me, like if they boost run to get over me to out to range, then I can strike with Burning Kick because it's still on curve.
Right.
Like that. And I don't feel as much value off of the EX for Burning Kick. Mainly because I would really rather play this card once and this boost once, or this boost twice. Because
Right.
of how good this boost is. Whereas I'm never
Right.
boosting Assault.
Sure. Because you're not striking afterward because it's not a continuous boost.
Right. Like
Okay.
I guess it's allowed if you have a hand that has literally nothing that works at range 1, except for Assault. But if that's true, like clearly you must have Blasting or Exoskeletal or Defend, so just play that and play Assault.
Right.
It's like it's really hard to be in a position where you need to go from range 1 to range 3. But yeah, that is possible.
Right. Okay.
That is a thing I should mention in general, by the way. As you do all these little calculations of what am I throwing at my opponent, how do I want to do it, do think a little bit sometimes, because positioning is a thing that Viper is not good at. That if I do this, will the rest of my hand support the position that I'm in? Because if you, like I said, if you throw that EX Assault and it's awesome, and then you look at your hand and you go, oh, I have Seismic Hammer, Burning
Seismic
Kick,
Hammer,
Emergency
Burning Kick,
Combination,
emergency
and Spike.
combination.
Oh,
Right.
what have I done?
Well, I mean, maybe you've set yourself up for a really good wild swing, but you're right.
But you
Like
would prefer to
it,
say, I'm going to do something and then still be in advantage position so that my opponent, then it goes, oh, I can't stay here at this range. Because if you go to range
definitely.
1, you have an advantage, you strike again, you probably win that strike. Now it's their turn, they're at range 1, and they go, oh, you're not that scary at range 1, actually. Like,
Right.
you only have a couple
Especially
things.
especially on my
Especially
turn
on
when
my
you can't
turn.
make stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, let me just strike
Gotcha.
and you tell me how you deal with Potbuster. Like, let's
Right.
see. Like why don't you tell me how you will deal with Exceed Potemkin assaults or with Gigantic Tiger Driver? You can cross out of Gigantic Tiger Driver, sure, yeah. Viper crossing out of things is technically legal. You better have a plan for coming back in. It's not very likely. But yeah, so think a little bit about the position you'll end up in, because correcting for bad positioning, and by the way, that is also tied to I mentioned previously, and I think you just referenced as well. Viper wild swings in defense a lot. Because
Yep.
she needs her hand for offense. This means she loves having cross in hand where she can't wild swing it.
Right. So you can't accidentally cross out by wild swinging.
Yep. The games where I performed the best against the person that in my experience, is the best Viper player I've ever encountered, including myself. He's better than me. I learned from him. Were games in which he wild swung cross and both copies of Stylish were in the bottom 4 cards of his deck.
Right.
Like the games where both those things were true were the games where I performed noticeably better than others.
Right.
One or
And
the other you can
that
deal
speaks
with.
a little bit. That speaks a little bit to the volatility thing you were talking about, where she is kind of compromised sometimes by deck order and luck of the draw more so than other characters.
Yes, and you have to be ready and willing to mitigate that. Where you go, okay, in those situations, I need to play against my own weaknesses, like play so that my opponent can't exploit my weaknesses until I'm able to build something that will support offensive momentum. Because then once you start rolling, you'll never stop. But what Viper's afraid of is that she never starts rolling. Like a Viper who never really gets to her exceed mode is a Viper who never gets to play the game.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. All right. So yeah, Burning Kick, very much an assault-like. I've already talked a lot about blazing. It's good with basically everything. It is just, it's a good power boost. It adds ignore armor. Notably, this doesn't mean it beats block, because they don't play block. Right? It means they can't play block, so they won't.
Yeah.
So you need to be thinking about what do they play when they know they can't block. And so be
Right.
careful of
Right.
throwing stuff like Blazing Spike, because Blazing Spike is really funny. But there is a
But
non-trivial chance they will go, oh well, I guess I'll play against Blazing Dive, and they'll play Assaults, and you'll go, oh
sure.
yeah, all right,
Yeah, they're gonna play against the side of the mix-up that they can beat, and you just turned off one side of the mix-up, so they'll play against the other one.
right. So like yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
So be wary of doing that
Okay.
where you turn off part of the mix-up to play a corner that they now are incentivized to play against, where you go, oh,
Right. Right.
ooh, maybe I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done that. So Blazing
That
Spike
makes
is not so
sense.
good. Blazing Sweep, pretty good. That is a range 3 card that they have to defend with Spike or Dive to do anything against, and that's
Right. Which is
scary.
scary.
Like for the same reason I mentioned a moment ago, Blazing Spike is not very likely, so they're probably not going to defend with Dive to cover the Spike. So if they defend with
Right.
Dive, they are specifically calling out the sweep, which
Yeah.
means they're going to get
They're
crushed by the
specifically
assault.
calling out sweep.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Yep. Makes your mix-up scary.
Interesting. Yeah.
Love this stuff. Well, let's move on to the other assault like. It's not actually an assault like. So this is her other Spike. It happens to be on curve, but the reason it's Spike is because 5 power with this before effect, because this card is 5 power when you play it.
Most of the time. Yeah. Oh, really all the time with what you're saying.
Functionally all the time, right?
Yeah.
When you're not wild swinging it, or if you're not, sometimes just like with any game of Exceed, you can go, oh man, I really need to play speed 6 at range 3, so I'll throw out this EX, and so you have
Sure.
this little poke, and you're kind of sad because you didn't want to play it that way, but sometimes you have
Yep.
to. But by default, you look at this and you go, that's 2 to 3 5 5, cool. Except it's not 5 because I'm Viper. It's 2 to 3 7 5.
Yep.
Or if you EX and this, it's 2 to 3 8 6, or 2 to 3
Yep.
7 6 ignore armor.
Yep.
And you start
Which
going,
is
huh?
that's a lot of numbers you're talking about there, D.
Yeah, I'm like 2 7 6. That's an ultra. Ignore
Yep.
armor. That's not legal.
Yeah, you can't do that. You go to jail if you do
Yeah,
that.
2 7 6 ignore armor is not allowed. Now, granted, that
Yep.
I'm talking about having an EX here.
Yep.
And an EX MCOM is a little on the expensive side. However, it is one of my favorite things because of how good those breakpoints are. Because going from I have 7 power, I beat basically everything, to I have 7 power, or sorry, 8 power, or 7 ignore armor, and 6 speed. So even if you had your cross, even if you had your EX assault that you were saving for just this situation, it's not good enough.
Yeah. It's not good enough.
Yeah, you need your EX cross, my friends.
Yeah.
This was not good enough, what you had ready for me. It also means
Yep.
that it works at range 2 if you do that. Where you go, now I have on curve range 2, do 1,000,000 damage. That is unreactable.
Right.
So what
without having to dip into your one speed boost
yes,
too.
without having to use a speed boost for it. So I love
Gotcha.
EXing MCOM in particular. But whether you play one or both copies together, either way, this pairs with power boosts because it makes these breakpoints magical. You can be on curve 7 power, you can be on curve 7 to 9 power. On curve 6 ignore armor is not that special, but look at your mix-ups, consider whether it's a thing that you need to do. It's fine.
Yep.
And if you really, really have to, you can say, all right, well, if they play a sweep, I'll just trade less badly. I don't like doing this. I don't recommend it. I think usually you should throw power on that. But
Yep.
yeah. Look at your situation, decide what you want to do with it. You've got a lot of fun things you can do. That's pretty much how you play the stack. This is meh. Because you were probably already going first, right? So the reason that you play a light MCOM is because the opponent has light in play, and you go, I need to initiate with a mix-up that ignores their light, so I'm going to play my own light. So that's the same reason you play light anything in a lot of cases.
To diffuse their advantage and win the speed tie.
Yeah, it's like to kind of go, you boosted your boost, I'm going to boost and strike so that I'm now the leading edge of this engagement.
Got it.
Yeah, MCOM usually does not need speed. There are cases, there are opponents. Actually, let's come back to Ryu. Shoryuken at range 2, critical Hadouken at range 3, critical Shuriken at range 2, critical Hadouken at range 3. You go, man, I need to make sure that occasionally I'm going to play a light on curve, so it becomes super above curve, so we can't just do that. You can't just play light spike. You can't just play light dive.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to hit that 7 speed.
Sometimes you need to say, you actually can't do anything about this. other than
Yep.
play your defensive tool that loses to all the other stuff. So
Right. Okay. Okay.
yep. Hidden weapons, as I've mentioned, is kind of it's what you do instead of preparing, right? It's
Yep.
you go, I don't have other more aggressive options, or my aggressive options are mediocre, and I think that I'm going to be in a worse position if I throw a turn at it. Well, this is better, like because hidden weapons is still spending a turn to get a gauge, which is what you want to do for your first 3 turns, um,
Right.
or first 3 or 4. Because one of them, it's not unlikely that your opponent will cross out or do something to evade, and you'll go, okay, well I didn't actually get a gauge this turn, so it might take you more than 3 turns to get your first 3 gauge, but it shouldn't take you very many more. And
Right.
it's perfectly fine to do it twice. Um, in Exceed mode, this is a little less common because in Exceed mode, you're usually going to be drawing more cards and then boosting power onto Imcom and just trying to kill the opponent. But there are times that you might still have to do it, and those are the times in which the cards you want are at the bottom of your deck. You don't have them. Well, okay, go through the deck. This is a better change cards action, which means, and the reason explicitly this is better than prepare is if your hand isn't good for you, well, then the cards that you have aren't cards that you need, so you should be changing cards, right? So this
Right.
is a change cards where you spend 2, draw 2, get a gauge, so you're up a force. And if
Yep.
what you need is force, then you'll have more resources, like you'll have more force total. But yeah, but you
Right.
don't value nearly as much post exceed because like having a little more force, probably not worth the turn. Having a little more
Right.
gauge,
And
100% worth the turn if you're not in exceed mode. In exceed mode, it's just more force.
yeah.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah, so I usually don't see
That
hidden
all
weapons
makes
post
sense.
exceed, but it's a perfectly good thing to do pre exceed.
Right. And you just got done talking up how good emergency combination is as an attack post succeed, especially when you exit. So
Yep,
having both copies live is valuable for that reason too. Okay.
yep. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about well, so I've been talking about the normals as we've been going. But normals are normals. They don't work differently for her than anyone else. She just makes them a lot scarier. She can make them notably she can make some of them way, way better, like Blazing Sweep, Electrifying Grasp,
Yep.
dumb things happen, Light Spike, Light Dive that she just plays on her turn. Um
Yep.
I will explicitly mention that she hates playing cross attack, but she is willing to if she has a plan to get back in. If she
Yep. So
So Seismic Hammer,
seismic hammer
yeah,
dive.
dive, depending
Yep.
on whether you're at range 1 or 2. So like, be willing to do that if you, especially in basic mode, if you need the gauge, if you have a plan to get back in. If you don't have a plan to get back in, well, run was your plan to get back in, and you just threw it away. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, be wary of doing that. And by the way, your other plan to get back in could just be I'm holding burst time, and I'm at range 5. I'll pay 2 force to move to range 3. Like
Yep.
you don't want to take the move action, but sometimes you will have to. That is, you're allowed. I'll forgive you. It's okay.
Right.
And then the other 2 normals here are focus. It's focus. Play it on defense when you need to play it. Sometimes initiate with it if you feel like initiating with it, because why the heck not? It's a very reliable attack shape, but it's usually better to have it on defense because if you have this in hand, you
Yep.
can actually defend from hand on defense, which is a thing that you're normally not allowed to do as Viper.
Which
Uh,
is crazy.
I know, right? Like, man, imagine having a card so good you can just respond with it from hand and it still wins a strike.
D, what are these purple and green numbers on the card? I'm not familiar with armor or
Oh yeah,
guard
you are.
except on
They're on
that.
assault. Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're on assault. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or blasting sometimes. I
Sometimes,
guess
yeah, yeah. That has
is the
red and
green
green
one.
numbers, not purple.
Right.
But yeah, it's got these weird numbers over here, which have something to do with why your opponent is sad, and then it has this thing here which makes you happy, which is draw a
Yep.
card. Um,
Yep.
reading is like so hot take here, but Viper. Okay, here's what isn't a hot take. Viper probably plays the fewest readings of most of the game. Yeah, most of the game, and probably the least in season 3, because why
Yep.
is she playing an instant boost when she could be playing a continuous boost? Like,
Sure.
why is she throwing away this perfectly good card she could use on defense when she could instead throw away this other card that she isn't going to use on defense to make an attack that is also unbeatable? And in fact, if
Yep.
she does that, she doesn't even have to predict what you're playing. She can just play a thing and make you predict what she's playing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so like she does not care for reading. It does not do very much for her. Um, it's still reading. Reading is still good. It's still good for diffusing ridiculous setups. But if your opponent has a ridiculous setup, then you have done something else wrong along the way.
You've given them too
You've
many
given them too much
turns.
time, too many turns, too
Okay.
much life. They should not have that. And then let's see, where is that key charge? There you go, key charge. Key charge is pretty decent.
Yep.
So key charge, to be clear, is the name of a boost that's prevalent in Street Fighter, which says add this to your gauge. Ryu has it, Ken has it, Zangief has it. But
Yep.
so block exists to give you gauge. It does not exist to win strikes because it can't. It does not exist to let you lose strikes less, even though it does that. It exists to get you gauge because you are Viper. You need your first 2 gauge ASAP.
Yep.
Once you're in Exceed mode, maybe sometimes you can consider playing it if you think that you actually need to block a payout of some sort. That is a viable way to diffuse a boost setup if you don't have a more exciting thing to do where your opponent has boosts and you go, oh, I guess I'll block these and then boost to beat their other boosts that they play next turn because you're falling into the trap of defensive set play where your opponent is now establishing an advantage over you and you're not really diffusing it effectively. You would much rather deal with your opponent's setups by boosting and striking.
Sure.
But yeah, so generally block is in the first half of the game, that's say pre-exceed, you are getting gauge. It's great to initiate at range 4 because if the opponent plays a thing that beats seismic hammer or dive, then it doesn't beat block.
Right.
I don't think there are any. Hold that thoughts. Fight has a above curve range 4 ignore armor opener. Yeah, okay. Well, there are very few things in the game that will actually beat your block if you initiate at range 4.
Right.
And also cover dive and seismic hammer. But yeah, so you're playing it to get gauge. Once you have gauge, you'll use it to exceed, which means, by the way, that it's fine to spend force on it if you know that you have your exceed lined up because you're going to get a reload. So pay force for value.
Yep. And so just get it into your gauge however you need to.
Yep.
Gotcha.
All right, that's the last of the normals. Now let's talk about the
Yep.
scariest,
Yep.
coolest, least played, and most important card in her kit. Maybe I don't know. That's not true.
Okay.
Least played card in her kit is probably actually Burning Kick, but it might be Seismo. I don't know. They're
Okay.
as far as attacks. This boost gets played all the time.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
we've talked about cheater. Cheater is whatever other boost, whatever other continuous boost you need it to be. So it's usually going to be stylish, but it might be fierce, it might be light, it might be electrifying, it might be blazing.
Yep. Yep.
Rarely anything else, but that's a lot of things that it can often be. I always cheater stylish if I can. Sometimes you need something else though. So keeping a
Yep.
cheater alive is great. This can put you in some awkward situations where you go, oh, I've already burned through my entire deck. Stylish is going to cause me to reshuffle, and then I can't use cheater anymore. Because notably, that means cheater is going to be in play. Stylish will enter play. Then you reshuffle, which means cheater goes into
Then
discard.
you reshuffle. You can't get
You're like, oh
you can't
no,
get stylish
I'm so
back.
sad because I've lost a copy of cheater for the rest of the game. Well, that's okay. If you're doing it right, the rest of the game won't be very long.
Right.
Like you're probably not going to hit your second shuffle. I have seen Vipers draw so aggressively that they've gone right through both shuffle or not both shuffles, but like right through both decks and
Both
won with
decks. Yeah.
almost no cards left at all. But it turns out while blazing exists, you can still win with almost no cards left at all because your opponent can't just block stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, so cheater's fantastic. Very, very important, very, very useful. Simple massage is the reason that range 1 is not safe for your opponent.
Right. Sure.
This is her command grab. This is her range 1 mid speed, where it's like, man, Viper has no play at range 1. Well, that's not entirely true. Thunder Knuckle exists and is medium reward. This thing exists and is absurdly high reward. If you
Yep.
initiate with Simple Massage, the opponent plays Focus or Sweep, you probably win the game. Because, I've said this a few times, the reason that the value on this is so high is because you drew 3 cards without spending a turn.
Yep.
And that's huge, right? You're not taking turns off, you're maintaining your options, you're maintaining your tempo, your momentum, and you're also crushing whatever their defensive option is, which means they have 1 fewer defensive option to use against all of your other stuff. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
so, so, so good. In fact, even if they block, you won this strike because you don't have to pay any force on this.
You just got 3
Yep.
cards.
This is another Rekka, by the way. This is a hit spin up to force, reach for spin, +1 power. You'll only pay that if you need to hit a breakpoint, or like I said, if you have a scripted reload because you're pre-exceed, but you're not pre-exceed. You will never play this as an attack pre-exceed.
Okay.
If you wanted to play this as an attack pre-exceed, then like you would be committing a critical, or just playing it raw and taking a risk that you would have to pay out your entire hands for your last gauge, and you're giving up cheater. Like I have questions about your
Right.
life decisions if you're doing that. You're
Right.
way better off just throwing crit Thunder Knuckle if you desperately need to deal with the slow and when in counterattack when you're in basic mode.
Right.
Post exceed though, initiate, it's automatically crit. You don't pay any gauge for it, and if you lose the mix up, okay, that's gonna happen. If you win the mix
Right.
up, they
At
die.
least at least you represented the side of the mix-up so that they know not to go to range 1
Yeah, they have to
sometimes.
play against it sometimes. If they're out of grasps, cool. You
Yep.
play light, you play Tempo Massage, that's a speed 6, that does 8 damage if it needs to. Can't do anything about that if they're
Yep.
out of their speed 7s.
Yep.
If you need to end the game immediately, and you can end the game immediately, then Light EX Simple Massage is available to you. Uh, I
Yep.
almost never see that happen. The reason I almost never see that happen is because you were probably already boosting one
Cheater.
copy. Yeah,
Yeah,
cheater's already
definitely.
gone, so how did you have EX Simple Massage in your hand? I don't understand. Uh,
Right.
Plus, that's still blockable. Like, at range 1, if Light is the thing that you boosted, then your opponent can still play block. And while you still
Right.
win
Okay, so
by playing Simple Massage at range 1 and hitting,
you didn't
you
kill him.
didn't kill them, and now you're out the Simple Massage, and you're like, well, was that worth it? You
Okay. Gotcha.
know, I will say that.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
you're describing kind of a narrow band of time in the game where you've already exceeded. They're low enough on life for it to be uh the killing blow, but not with blazing in play. Like I can see why this is a threat, but maybe not one that gets played very often.
Right, and I'm specifically talking about light, which is as the thing that's niched. Like,
Right.
you would think that you want to make a mid speed faster, but most of the
Right.
time, you're at range 1, you're throwing a mid speed. You're actually going to make it look like something else instead because you're Viper. You go, oh, let me play exoskeletal range 1, and they say, well, I'm not playing grasp, right?
Yeah, this feels assault like,
This is assaults. Like, this is assaults or focus. I'll play block or I'll play focus or I'll play sweep, and then they, you know,
and then they
die.
die.
Right. Like, and if they
Yeah.
played block, you go, well, I still drew 3 cards, whatever. Um, like that's not too bad because I didn't commit gauge to it, and I didn't commit light to it, and I didn't commit blazing to it. Which
Gotcha.
obviously you wouldn't commit blazing to it because they blocked. But anyway, those two things imply one another. But yeah, electrifying Temple Massage, by the way, is why the opponent.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
yeah. So this is usually if you have a little bit of gauge because you don't necessarily want to need to commit an entire hands to killing the opponent in case they sorry, let me rephrase that. If they play a focus, they're at 12 life. You go, okay, well I can throw away literally my entire hands and probably all of my gauge as well and drop them to 2 life. But it doesn't kill them.
Right.
It's better to leave them at 4 life and keep blazing grasp because then they die next turn.
Yep. Yep.
Um, or something like that. But yes, so the times that I have expected to see burst time in the game, I have instead seen electrifying Simple Massage in the game.
Like just drop all your gauge onto
Just
it.
throw all your gauge at it, throw the ultra from
Yeah.
hands, throw a bunch of force, whatever.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
just to clarify, these force spends are separate,
Yes,
right?
they are separate.
You spend up to 4
This is
force and spend up
yeah.
to 4 force
If
again.
this is 12 power, then it's 8 force, which is
Gotcha. Okay.
ridiculous. Um,
Yes.
yeah, like it's rare. But the thing about electrifying, so in the same way that exoskeletal says this is assault, electrifying says, hey, guess if I'm playing sweep or grasp. And if they think it's grasp, they play
Right.
focus because they go, yeah, you can't stun me,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so you love it when they play sweep or focus if you're throwing simple massage.
And then you drop temple
Yeah.
massage. Okay. So it's the third side of what they think is a two-sided mix-up.
Yes.
Okay. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier in the lesson about it's fine if your opponent feels safe as long as they're wrong.
Yes. Right.
Gotcha.
Because they go, okay, one side of the mix up is grasp, so I beat that with focus. One side of the mix up is sweep, so I beat that with dive. Well, this beats both of those.
Right.
And you go, well, actually, they
And then you lose.
then you lose. Yeah. So they beat this with grasp, which you
Yep.
then beat with your grasp or your sweep situation, right? So like they're not likely to play the thing that beats this if they know it beats the two. If it loses to the two things they think you're actually playing, which is
Right.
also why, as I mentioned earlier, maintaining access to one sweep is pretty useful. And then even if you have both copies of sweep down, you want to maintain access to one focus. That's actually just a general exceed principle, of course, is you want to maintain your mix up. If you
Yep.
if you have 0 focuses and 0 sweeps, then you have no counterattacks. Which means your opponent will just play fast things and win strikes every chance they get on their turn. Now, your Viper,
Okay.
that's probably actually not the end of the world because they're going to hit you for 3 or 4 damage every turn, and you're going to hit them for 6 or 7 damage every turn. But
Right.
it's still pretty annoying to deal with. You would rather at least have them have to think about some other part of the mix-up.
Right. And you were already sort of factoring in that you were going to lose strikes that happened on your opponent's turn when you were playing Viper anyway. So it's just
Mhm.
more, even like you have even fewer options to defend it with, but that was kind of the math anyway.
Yeah, like you were kind of expecting that to happen, but you don't want to, and you don't, but you
Right.
don't want to end up in a situation where the opponent has mid speeds and they boost lights, and now their mid speed is completely unbeatable because you would have answered it with focus, because it anyway.
Yep.
You
Yep.
all those
Okay.
sorts of situations. But yeah, so Temple Massage is super super scary. Um, Funnily enough, the boost this pairs with is, like I said, not for Temple Massage. The boost this pairs with is for what the opponent needs to think it is. Um,
Right.
so like I said, you can throw light on it if you have specific situations where it's kind of niche and you need to set up, but then your opponent goes, "Oh, it's unbeatable Temple Massage. I lose the game, or I play block." You would
Right.
usually
So
prefer to say, "I'm throwing something that looks like something else." Oops, Temple Massage.
right. So even when you're dropping boosts on it, it's to obscure it, not necessarily to make it unbeatable.
Right. So that's like
Okay.
electrifying to threaten grasp, exoskeletal or defend to threaten assaults, blazing to
Yep.
threaten grasp or sweep, electrifying also threatens
Yep.
sweep. Um,
Pretty much
yeah,
everything
pretty much anything.
can threaten temple massage because temple massage is always
Yeah,
threatening.
because if it hits, it's incredibly good. Um,
Okay.
like it's absurdly rewarding because this draw 3 cards. Yeah, and to be once more, let me emphasize, it's rewarding not because of how much damage it can deal, although that might mean it wins the
Right.
game. It's rewarding because it draws 3 cards without spending any time,
Right.
and that's fantastic. Mhm. So yeah,
All
I
right.
think
Makes
that covers
sense.
it. Any questions
Yeah.
or anything you feel like I didn't talk about that you wanted to know about?
I'm looking at the time, and we've gone about 100 minutes on Viper,
That's way more than I
which is
expected.
awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to talk about this character from a beginner perspective, and
That's
so
fair.
I hope I hope we kind of covered that. The one thing I want to talk about, maybe very briefly, because we are probably stretching the limits of people's attention spans here, maybe counterplay to Viper. How do they stop this?
Right. So the short
And
answer,
and what?
yeah. So the short answer I deal with Viper is her weakness is positioning. Um,
Okay,
so what Viper hates is you got her in the corner because you threw out a grasp when she didn't have a focus, or when she was just wild swinging because she doesn't usually have better options. You got her in the corner, you crossed out, she has to chase after you. Viper paying force for the move action is excruciating. She hates doing it. She's going to. She doesn't
right,
have a choice because she can't play at long range. Um, but every card she throws away is one more little piece of alchemy that she can't use in her next explosive cocktail. That actually is a golden
right.
card. But anyway, um, like she doesn't want to throw cards at movements when she could throw them at you. Um, so you can so she's vulnerable to zoning. You can keep an eye out for seismic hammer. Do things that kind of shield yourself against seismic hammer and dive if you have the option to do so. Um, and then for late game, the way that you survive what late game Viper can do to you, which is just completely maul you, is that you cultivate for EXs. And now this is actually like a very important skill in high level exceed play, which is that from the beginning of the game, and this is true of everybody, but it's an understated skill. At the beginning of the game, you should usually be thinking about what EXs you want to have by the end of the game. And so when the opponent goes, you happen to have that EX, it's because no, you were waiting for that EX. When you held one copy, you didn't play it because you needed the second copy. And so against Viper,
Right.
you're going to be holding for your EX assaults, your things that hit above curve breakpoints, your EX dive, maybe an EX cross, though usually it's fine to have just one cross. Um, your EX grasp, so that you can go, okay, when she throws this thing that's unbeatable except by this, I have this.
You have this.
Yep.
Gotcha.
You're also generally going to be fine blocking her payouts at range 1, where you go, okay, she threw a big thing at me, and as long as it's not, a low commitment simple massage, then I can play block and focus. Sorry, blocking not meaning literally playing block, but block or focus, and go, okay, I can mitigate my loss here to give myself more life, so that when I win on my turn, our life is closer, right? Because if you
Yep.
maintain a life lead forever, and then Viper goes, "Oh, I have to trade with my remaining options," it's really hard for me to take clean wins because she only has, her assault likes and her exoskeleton and her defend and stuff. Then it's harder and harder for her to pull out that win. But yeah, so watch what's left. Also, Viper has a hard time dealing with reading because like she has very specific windows in which she can get rid of a lot of cards, and other than that, it's hard for her to just ditch normals. So
Right.
she's going to go through her deck really fast. At which point she may well have a hand that has 3 or 4 known normals in it. And so you love playing focus on defense at range 1 in particular, but holding on to a reading so that you can, nip her right there when she's vulnerable means that either she's going to lose a strike for free, and you can figure out how to capitalize based on whatever your character likes to do, or she's going to have to think about how to play around you having reading, and it's going to require her to spend probably 1 or 2 turns that she doesn't want to spend doing things that aren't
Right.
coming at you with everything she's got.
It's funny because like changing cards to get rid of your normals is not a particularly low tempo action on the scale of Exceed actions. Like it's not prepare, it's not things like
No,
that. But Viper plays so high tempo that she can't even take mid tempo actions without feeling the sting of it.
exactly.
That's really funny to
Yeah,
me.
just spend
Yeah.
a turn changing cards to get rid of your normals. Viper's like, oh, do I have
What?
to?
That's so
Oh
slow.
gosh, I'm giving my opponent a whole nother turn. That's just
Gotcha.
unforgivable. But yeah,
Yeah.
also, if you are the kind of person who's willing to play into mix-ups, then you can do a lot to play into Viper, where if where you can make her afraid of throwing her mix-ups into you. And
Mhm.
so the key things here are you can defend on turn 1 with dive and hit the seismo. You can defend on turn 1 with assault and waste her dive. Uh, if you filter for the right EXs, then you can defend in situations where her stylish payout is not a payout. She gets squished for 1,000,000 damage, right?
Right.
Um, it is also generally good
Ju-
as every character to throw up your own like speed boosts or really good defensive boosts. Like defend is not super good, but if you have something like demon cells or a +4 armor boost or whatever, throwing that out makes it much harder for her to overcome. It requires her to dedicate specific resources to it. Where it's like you throw out light, she probably has to throw out her own light or just take a big risk. Uh,
yeah.
and her spending a turn doing that means that you then have the turn back to you. So it kind of makes you want to play more defensively against her.
Okay. That makes sense. I also the fact that and I feel like this is a good place to end the lesson because we started with this. The strategic linearity concept comes back here to me as well. That like this is always going to get played.
Hmm.
That means that as Viper's opponent, I can guarantee probably that 2 turns or maybe more throughout the game, I'm going to have +3 or maybe even +6 power for free. If I can plan for that, if I can hold those EXs for that time, I can really make her pay for the things that I know for a fact she's going to do because she's going to be doing all these things.
Right.
Is that
Yeah,
fair?
that's right. And so Viper then has to go, man, sometimes I have to play the light thunder knuckle on top of my stylish instead of getting a better turn out of this because my opponent is still threatening their EX cross, which beats everything else that I could be
Right.
throwing at range 2. Um,
I
and
gotcha.
anything you do
Okay.
to make Viper play lower tempo is great for you because by default, the longer the game goes on, the worse Viper's going to perform because she is burning through cards. She's burning through options. Her discard's getting bigger.
Yep.
More and more things are going down. And she relies on the fact that she's just going to keep drawing more things. And so she doesn't run out of options until she actually runs out of cards twice.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. No, that all makes sense. You've also I've and this is probably where we should end it. That I've heard that Viper is a hard to play character, is maybe considered sort of a weak character, and I don't think is a particularly popular character. You have talked about her in a way that makes I don't play Rushdown. You've talked about her in a way that makes me want to play Viper.
Good.
I hope that people who are listening to this, if you hear this on YouTube later, pick this character up. She sounds rad, especially the way that Dee's talking about her. Like up the Viper representation. I want to see more of this character now.
Yep. Yeah, I think Viper, like Kokonoe from Blaze Blue, is a character who excels at this offensive alchemy of blending your attacks and your boosts to create unique pressuring things. And she's bad on defense. Like she's just
Yep.
she will fold under pressure. You have to be the one pressuring at all times. But she can do that. Like Viper is one of my favorite characters in season 3 at this point in time because having played against somebody who showed me how Viper can actually be played, I went, oh, this character is breakneck aggression. I love this.
Right. Yeah, this is really
Yep,
fun.
and she's good at it. Like she supports it. It's not just me deciding to play this wild and crazy line. It's that no, this character is actually tuned to do exactly this, and if you can do it well, she sings.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you
Well,
very
that's
much for
awesome.
for pulling me aside for this.
Yeah, thank you, Dee. I really appreciate it. And everybody, I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I will see you again later for the next one.
Hmm.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.